Hello, hi, I'd like to share a project update. So this is the current work of my project so far. I've been a bit busy moving from Atlanta to back to New York City, so I have not been able to do an update for a while, and I have created quite a bit of updates that have also slipped my mind, and I may not have total knowledge of my own application, but I'll try my best. Okay. So currently, the functionality that I've created so far was that every time a new user will sign up to create a new account into my application, I created an email service that will email the user to requesting them to click a link to activate their account. And I'll show you the functionality of how that is done within the code and in the perspective of my application so far. Okay, so here. Okay, so let me go over the basics of the code so far. So in my login controller, I have four dependencies. I have my database, I have my email service, I have my configuration properties and view resolver. I also created a new user key as a private GUID that I'm going to use in my application. If I go to my sign up, you will notice that you will notice a couple of things. You'll notice that my code as I develop it is very human readable. It's almost as if you can read line by line like a storybook, and that was my overall objective to designing my application. Um, so basically, in my sign up method, I have a new sign up. I'm going to pass in a new email and a new password. If all fails, is going to throw a messaging exception. And one of the enhancements I created in my project was that I created a global exception handler, which is done in the controller, which is right here. So basically, no longer will I have to implement a try-catch block and anticipate where my application will fail. Instead, every time my application fails, my global exception handler will catch the exception and is going to log the exception. So basically, I have a dependency of a logger, and if when I catch the exception, it's going to go into my database and log the exception, and also the basically the URL link that was requested when the exception took place. So I'll know exactly where my application failed. So now, if I go to my back to my login controller, I will explain what my application is doing. Basically, it will go to database service, is going to check if the user account exists, and if the account exists based on the email, then I will add a property that says that the account exists, and I will get that property default text from a configuration file, which is in my um, application properties file. Okay, so this is no longer hard coded, basically. If the database does not find a user, it's going to be a new user. So my what I will do is I'll generate a new user key and is going to generate a random GUID. Next, I will go to my database service. I'll insert a new account, and in the parameters that are going to be inserted is going to be email, password, and a new user key. And then my mail service is going to notify new register and is going to pass in email and user key. And then after all that has passed, is going to go ahead and return a register form. So there we go. Line by line, we know what's going on. And if I want to look at the details of my mailing service, what I will do is that I'll go to mail service. Mail service is an implementation of iNotification service. And iNotification service is basically my blueprint for creating this mail service. I will say that a mail service is a notification service, and in my notification service, I have a method called notify new register. I'm going to pass in a string and a GUID value, and if all fails, it's going to throw a messaging exception. So I go to my mail service now. My email service is a mail service. So inside my email service, I have a dependency of email utility, and in my and basically is going to override this method notify new register, and now I can see the detail of what is going on in my new register method. So I basically created a email utility, and I can instruct what is going on in my notify new register method, which is it's going to go into the email utility, is going to build a message, is going to pass in the values of email and key to build the message, and then is going to send the mail. And I've created this manually and separate the tasks. So my email service has one job, is going to notify the new register, and I see how that job is done. And if I want to see the details of how this message was created, it's hence build message, I can go into the email utility and check how that is done. So I build this like a builder class. So I go into my utility, my email utility. You'll see the separation of tasks being implemented. And also one more thing, if I go back to my email service, I will see that you'll notice that I have a couple of tags in here. But mainly I have this asynchronous tag. And the reason why I did this was I gave this a thought of how I want to implement the best practice and the best way to generate an email service. And basically, what I came up with was that hey, if I'm going to send a message into a server and I'm going to wait for a listener for that server to acknowledge that a mail was accepted or it was rejected, it may possibly take too long. I don't want to have to wait and hold up my main thread to return a register form or have this continuous looping in my website until the service is done. So what I've done is I created this asynchronously. The best way to implement asynchronous activity within Spring development is to use annotation, and there's a neat annotation tag that will allow me to run this asynchronously, which is async. Better than implementing runnable and then overriding the methods and to manually handling asynchronous connection. But so that is not needed. So this is a lot easier and better practice. So now I go to email utility. Email utility has two properties. It has a mail builder and it has configuration properties. My configuration properties are basically being pulled from my application properties, and this is basically a text file which contains all my properties of my code. And so I will get rid of all my hard-coded values. So none of these values are no longer hard-coded. They can be manually adjusted from this one file. This one file is being called from a class which is my properties package. I will see my configuration properties. These will look into my base package, my application properties file, and is going to assign each one of these variables to the tag of my property. So that is, and every time I want to use a configuration property, I just inject it into the class that I want to use it in. So that is the way I decide to handle this. Okay, let me go back to my email utility. So email utility, it has two jobs. It's going to build a message and it's going to send a mail. So I build a message, is going to take in the email and the key. If all fails, is going to throw a messaging exception. Now I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a message, new message. In order to build this my message, what I'm going to have to do is I have to build the properties for this message and create a session. And I was able to separate the task and one-line it again. The reason being is that like hey, this my message is going to my job to build my message is going to create a new my message, is going to go to mail builder, is going to build the properties of this message and create a session. Okay, and that will take care of all the jobs for creating a my message. My message helper variable or class, I should say, my message helper class is going to basically pass in my message once it is built and is going to set values of my email. So the first thing is that I'm going to send it to the email of the user of the newly account created, and then it's going to set the subject based on the values of my configuration property, and it's going to set the text to another value of my configuration property, no longer hard-coded. It will append the values of email and key to the message, and it's going to send the email based on that. Now I've returned the class which my method is the class of the method, and what this would allow me to do is create a chain call from multiple methods in my class. So hence I was able to one-line it before. So the design pattern in here is that I can use this utility almost like a builder. So build message, and once it completes building a message, it's going to send the message. And there we go. If I go into my mail builder and see how my message was built, you'll see how that is done. Basically, what I've done is I go to my factories, and my factory has a builder class. And I created this builder class, and what it will do is it will inject configuration properties and set the properties of my message. So Mail Builder has two methods. It's going to build a property and it's going to create a class. In building the property, it instantiates a new property. It's going to put the values of my SMTP connection, my port, my authentication, my sockets, ports, class, all this information, and these values are no longer hard coded. Is going to be pulled from my application's properties file. So if I want to make any changes in the future, all I would have to do is go into my application property file and just change the values of my text. And there we go. If I go back to my mail builder, you'll see that the properties are built. Once the properties are built, it's going to return this class, and once this class is returned, is going to allow me to also chain nest and create a session. Session is going to create a session. One of the key ingredients for building a my message is to get the session. So the session is basically going to create an authentication session with the email server. Right now I'm using a Gmail account. My application is linked to a Gmail account. Is going to log into that Gmail account using these credentials, and these are based on configuration in my configuration properties. Okay, so all is set. One day in the future, I will basically just create my own email server, and I will authenticate with my local email server rather than using Gmail service. So, okay, so that is how the email service is done. And if I go back to my code, you can see line by line what is going on. And if I want to see the details, I can break it down. The tasks are separated, very orthogonal, and design implementation has been created tactically. So now if I run my application and see what's going on, how this is done, okay, maybe it would help if I ran my application first. Okay, so go here, debug, Spring Boot app, and the startup time for building the application is not too bad. If everything is connected, it is still done quickly. So so now I go into my local host. This is the file. The bootstrapping is really nice, and if I expand it, it will fall in place. So I go to sign up. I'm going to use my real email, and I'm going to use my password. The JavaScript will kick in every time there's a change. 1, 2, 3, and then add a special character. Go green. There we go. Okay, I'm going to submit. Once I submit, you see that there's looping and it returns a register page. So what has happened up until now? So I go into my my database and I check to see what has happened. You see a new document has been created in my database. You'll see my email. You'll see the password. You'll see this active flag is currently false, and there's a GUID key that was created. And it will also generate some sort of permission, a list of permissions for the user account. Okay, what else has happened? So I go into my Gmail, and what do I see? I see a loading screen. Hopefully, it goes past this point. Oh. Okay, so something has happened. I don't know why it's like this. Okay, and you'll see that there's an email. I was sent an email, and after this loads, you will see my message for the application. You have signed up to impressions. Click this link to activate the account. And what will happen in here is that there's a link that was provided that I created in my application. Once I click this link, it will activate my account. But let's briefly go over that code of how that account will be activated. I go to my account controller. I go to activate parameter, and what we'll do is it will get the activation. it will retrieve the value of my email and the value of my key, and which is done in the email. You'll see that in my email, you'll see that the property for email and the property key is attached to the email. What will happen is that once I click this link, um, this method will be called. I have a DB service, and it's going to call the method activate the account. It's going to pass in email and key, and basically his job is to activate the account. It's going to return the welcome page. If I go into my DB service to see the details of how this service was done, I go to activate account. Activate account is going to throw two possible exceptions, which is username not found exception and Mongo exception. Those are two possible exceptions. If the username is not found, it's going to throw an exception. If there's some sort of connection issue with the database, it's going to throw a Mongo exception. Authentication as a model is going to find, basically is going to find the account with the email passed in. Once I have the account, I'm going to check the key of the account to see if it's equal to the key of my GUID in the email. And if it is all true, what will happen is that I will set active to true and I'll save it to the repository. There we go. So what will happen currently that is active parameter is false. I will go ahead and click this link. It sends me to the welcome page. I go look into my database and check the value, and there we go. There we go, it's true. So there we go. This account is now active. I will continue working on this application, and let's see where I go.